So earlier in the semester, I made a claim stating that college education is not worth it and that it is the biggest mistake young adults make. Today, I still firmly believe in that claim, but now I'm going to talk about why an American college education isn't worth it. For those whom you know, and myself included, who plan on attending an American university, consider this a warning. If you want to suffer from excess financial distress, by all means, go to an American college. What I'm trying to say is, don't go to an American college. Today I'm going to re-emphasize some of the main points from that claim and introduce new information about why the issue of the money, the depressing outlook, and the viable alternatives that are available outside of this country all point to gloom for the American college economy. So the education system in this country is very counterintuitive. But before I explore outside the United States, let us review why the finances of a college education doesn't add up. Charles Kenny of Foreign Policy says, and 3/4 argue that college is too expensive for most Americans to afford. ABC News says, college tuition has skyrocketed almost 600% over the past 30 years. As each year passes by, it's been almost inevitable that higher education becomes more unaffordable. In fact, the rising cost of tuition has outpaced the country's rate of inflation, consumer price index, healthcare, average salary, and gas prices. Had the cost of tuition and rate of inflation grown at the same pace, the average tuition at a public four-year would be $2,000 instead of $6,700, which we have this semester. And like I said from the previous speech, 7 out of 10 college students will graduate with a student loan debt with an average of almost $30,000. Now, today I'm also going to introduce to you guys how much does it actually cost for a household to send a kid to a college university. For middle-income families, it takes 28% of their family income to send a kid to a public university. For middle-income families wanting to send their child to a private university, it takes 80% of their income. For lower-income families, it takes 55% just to send a kid to a public university. And for community colleges, for lower-income families, it takes 49% out of pocket for them to send their kid to community college. Unless the government bails us out from all the student loans, we are still left to fend for ourselves for the meantime, which doesn't sound optimistic since college spending and financial aid aren't in the student's best interest or the school's best interest. According to Rahima Ellis and Jeff Black of NBC News, about 1 in 6 people who owe money on their student loans is in default, which is very detrimental to their adult life because they can't declare bankruptcy on student loans. The Center on Budget and Policy Priorities say, in many states, the cuts over the last 5 years have been remarkably deep, and this is why things won't get better for us when we transfer to a four-year. It's because most states, their education budget is discretionary. What that means is they can do whatever they want with the tax revenue and spend it however much they want for school. For example, compared to 2008, which was the lowest point of the recession, today, states across the country are spending an average of 28% less than at that time per student. It also doesn't help that most schools are emphasizing on looking better aesthetically for their campuses. They want bigger and better gyms, they want better looking buildings, hotel style dorms, indoor swimming pools. And it also doesn't help that your state is soon going to be accommodating for the retiring baby boomers generation's public pensions by taking that money out of the education budget. Catherine Rampell of the New York Times writes, states will soon have to pay out trillions in public pensions for the retiring baby boomer generation, squeezing the funds for training the next generation of workers even more. So if your state can't provide you with the education you can afford, what do? Well, instead of going to Salome, you think outside the box. Despite the initial culture shock, there are plenty of alternatives that you could do which involve moving out of the country. Some of the best universities outside the United States offer high-quality education with tuition costs as low as $4,000. Some examples are the University of Sao Paulo from Brazil, Fudan University in China, are ranked higher than George Washington University and Notre Dame, and of course, they're cheaper. Canada is a great option. The Christian Science Monitor says, the Christian Science Monitor ranked Canada as the third best worldwide. According to them, Canada did rank first in terms of resources, with total higher education funding as a percentage of gross domestic product coming in quite high, and providing generous funding for research and development and per student. Cape Town University from South Africa is ranked higher than Georgetown, and it costs $8,000 to attend compared to $40,000 to attend at Georgetown. McGill University, one of the top universities in Canada, is around $14,561. A report from NBC News highlights or provides an example with a student named Eric Anderson. He's from Portland, Maine, a full undergraduate university, where he goes to McGill University and pays around $10,000 compared to what he would pay at Georgetown, which is $36,000. A few examples of universities here versus outside. University of Chicago, it's around $46,000. George Washington, it's around $46,000. Stanford, it's $42,000. But the top three colleges in Canada are $20,000, $15,000, and $10,000 respectively. Even more so, American students can apply for scholarships and even use their U.S. student loans in Canadian colleges. Another benefit for Americans going to Canada, according to a report by McClatchy, one of the things she tells them is that an international education shows versatility, and employers like that. And in the past decade, the number of American students in Canada grew by 50%. So to summarize, financially, things are bad. They're going to get worse, and unless you're going to take out loans, help isn't coming anytime soon. It's time to wake up, look beyond the border, and you might just find yourself a good deal.
Is it their own clothes? No.
Scott, what did you think?
I thought the intro was well organized, and it was clear on what you're going to talk about. Then you went into your preview, I think, and then I thought you were going to go into the body of the speech, and then it seemed like you went back to the intro again. I was kind of like confused on that a little bit, and then you had a lot of good research, a lot of good statistics and everything. There was a point where you said middle income families were spending this amount of percentage on their money on universities. I think you could have defined middle and lower income families, like how much they make a year, to put that into perspective a little bit more. Your delivery was pretty good. You kind of stood still a little bit though, and you just like turned your head, and you just like, I don't know, and then overall, I don't personally agree with it, but I thought it was, you made some good points. The only thing though is, you say like, it's really expensive, but there's like scholarships and like, the government does help you out. Like,
If
I
you're
know
a
that
citizen though. I'm sorry.
in the America, so like at UCs, they have a thing where if your family makes less than $80,000 a year, tuition is free. And so I think you could have acknowledged the opposing view and then tried to refute that. Aside from that, it was a pretty good speech.
All right, I'll echo a lot of the comments that Scott just made. I think that the opening was clear. I thought you had a clear statement of your purpose. There's a pretty solid preview. There's a lot of information in the speech that is cited effectively. I do think that the statistic that you had on all of the, how much you were spending, for instance, of a family's income based on, what level the family's at, that sounds like it's some parsing. In other words, to go to a community college, if you're in the poorest group of families, costs 49% of your income. But that's not the statistic that we were using when we were talking about how much income you were spending if you were in the other category. So it seems like you're jumping around a little bit between the categories when you are making those comparisons. I also think we needed to get a source citation on those statistics, because I'm sure that you know enough math to figure it out, but I doubt very much that you did it yourself. I would suspect that came from someplace, and it ought to be cited in the speech. The discussion about states' funding of their own school programs is okay. In California, of course, it's quite a bit different, since our funding is for the most part not discretionary. We're required to spend 50% of the money that we bring in taxes on education. That's not higher education. There is some variation in that sort of spending. So for instance, we got to spend half the state budget on education, but that doesn't mean that we have to spend half the state budget on higher education. There's an issue there. It does seem to affect your ethos a little bit when you are making the argument here in your American classroom, spending that money. So I think you might want to address the elephant in the room in regard to that, and explain why it is that it should be do as I say, not as I do. That's to me one of those rebuttal issues that's sitting in my head that's going, why is he giving me this argument? So that's a little bit of a problem. All right, thank you.